Sue Minahan.
Welcome to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and her panel of guests bring you leading-edge astrology conversations through a journey of soul growth patterns connecting astrology's energetic cycles. Get ready to understand your path in the cosmic roots of the stars.
Hello, I am Sue Rose Minahan, and I am I'm the founder and the host of Talk Cosmos, and we're a YouTube Conversations Awakening Your Authentic Self. Weekly on YouTube, Talk Cosmos, YouTube, Facebook page, podcasts. And today is April 10th, and we have a guest panel. We have 3 panels, and we also have these wonderful guest panels. I'm always delighted to be able to interact with astrologers that have unknown ideas about things that we can cook up, what is happening? So that's pretty casual conversation here, but it's pretty much the truth. And the conversation tonight, or today, wherever you happen to be, or spanning across the globe, is the upcoming, in 2 days, Jupiter and Neptune. Now, they get together every year, actually. Jupiter makes its little cycle, but not, actually, what I'm trying to say is it's in Pisces. Now, that's a cycle by itself, and it's said to be 166 years when it returns. But I checked in solar fire back 5,400 years as far as it would go BCE and ahead. And actually, it's kind of wonky a little bit. I don't know if it has what to do with, we're talking about maybe a little bit of elliptical orbits, even though Neptune is fairly systematic. And so is Jupiter. But still, it's not always 166. It's 13 and 153. They add up. The universe can add. It's the most amazing. Although their system and cycle is a little bit different. And why did I get into this? Well, because it is a detail. It says right on this 166 years, but it's most peculiar. So we'll talk more about that. But I am delighted to have 2 British astrologers who are leaders in the field of astrology. Israel Ajose and Wendy Stacey. So Israel Ajose is an astrologer that is the president of Astrological Lodge of London. And Israel is of many capacities. He does a whole spectrum. He teaches astrology, tarot, esoteric teachings. He combines traditional, medieval, psychological, Vedic techniques. That's very comprehensive. And he is, besides the president of the Astrological Lodge of London, of course, he has his own practice, but he also includes cosmology, mythology, occult sciences, Kabbalah, shamanism, divination. And so in other words, you find out, I'm sorry, I'm tongue-tied today. I feel like I'm living this Pisces energy that is mishmashing, right? So I truly apologize. But on Talk Cosmos, you can read it. There's all about the bio there. So I will so thank you, Israel, so much. And we also have Wendy Stacey. Hopefully I'll get through this a little better. And Wendy, you are the principal of International Mayo School of Astrology. Mayo was a gentleman in 1973 that founded this, and it's also, we have Mayo Clinic. It's nothing foreign to us Americaners or whatever we are over here on this side of the pond. And also you are with the astrological chair of the Astrological Association. A bit different terminology than on this side, but that's great. And you're an author. You have written in journals, books, Uranus square Pluto, 2012. And you have two that are about to be published, COVID-19 through the microscopic lens of astrology and unaspected planets. And you also received the prestigious Charles Harvey Award for exceptional service to astrology, which I imagine was at UAC, because they have that wonderful, which is a great, yes?
It was at the British Astrological Association conference. So yeah,
Oh,
it's the other side of the pond, the other side of the Atlantic.
yes, I love that idea of the pond. It's so true. And most importantly, too, you run a free webinar on current affairs every Thursday, UK time, and that can be registered. You can find that on the site. Also, Israel has these wonderful, for the Astrological Lodge of London, there are these Monday night events that I know are very popular, plus free classes for people. So it's a one, both of all of these organizations add such a matrix to the consciousness. Indeed.
Most definitely.
So
they keep us busy.
Yeah, they do.
It's true. It's really true. And I appreciate this time. I know it's 9 o'clock over there, and so it's 10 o'clock in the morning over here. So sunrise, sunset. I have coffee sitting on the side. Yeah. So, Neptune was discovered in 1846. And of course, it is the modern ruler of Pisces. And I identify both. We have Jupiter before that, and we have Neptune. And interestingly, if we look at the 166-year cycle, and of course we can look at the chart too, it's happening in 2 days, and welcome all your ideas. But I was trying to see, okay, the first idea is that as of that event in 1856, which is notable because there was a Paris Treaty, and it happened to be in 1856 also the Crimean
War, yeah.
Yes, the Crimean War that Russia had started, that because it wanted land that it was closer, and then the Baltic Sea, and France, England, and a host of other nations, about 5 nations, came and said, no, you're not doing this, and it stopped Russia. Not without a lot of casualties, and it did bring up, anyway, it was quite a relevant year because it also brought up the consciousness of the ethnic smaller nations, that yes, you have an identity, which I think is a repeating theme. So the point is that if you look at that chart and the following chart, that might be an aspect that we'll try to see if we can see some thread that's where our direction of intention can go. Yeah. Right. So, I know that was what I wanted to present and drop, hopefully, to open up your thoughts. And that is that these two rulers are brothers in mythology. They both rule the oceans. I mean, now they rule the oceans, but Jupiter rules the sky in mythology. And so there's really a unity of consciousness, a visible consciousness, I think, that's trying to be, which is not always an easy process, is it?
Yeah. Jupiter Neptune is never going to be an easy process. But I think the idea that both of them were brothers in mythology, I think, is very important to touch on. And the fact that both of them, we've got the traditional ruler, with Jupiter being the ruler of Pisces, and the modern ruler. But I feel because they are linked with Pisces, the waters, I mean, Pisces can be likened to the oceans. And when it's quite interesting, if anybody's been on a cruise or just even go to the seaside and just take a time to look and, observe the vastness of how the ocean, it just seems to just go on forever. It seems to be, or if you've ever been on a cruise and just look overboard, just seems to be just nothing. It's water, you know. And so there is something about Pisces, Neptune, and throwing in Jupiter in the mix that is, it's boundless. Where does something start or where does something end? The boundaries become blurred in some kind of way, or overtaken by these gigantic planets. And let's not forget that Jupiter is the biggest planet in our solar system also as well. So we know Jupiter, you know, represents growth and, you know, fertility and you know, excess, and you know, that's his purpose, is to be fluid, to, you know, grow and develop in the best way possible. And then we have Neptune also as well. I think we're embarking on something that is extremely fertile, and it can really open up the doors of compassion. There's no telling what doors this Jupiter Neptune conjunction are going to open for us. But it's a great time to be alive. I'm very much excited by it, and where it's going to be taking us, and things that are going to be discovered or uncovered with this planetary combination.
Potent, yeah, dissolving. It's very true.
Yeah,
and cleansing, that water, cleansing,
Yeah.
purifying. I was in a class and that was brought up, and you know, it seems too with Wendy. Did you have your?
Yeah, I mean, it's so enormous. I mean, I have to say, I've been waiting for this conjunction for a long time, and I think, you know, I always see astrology as manifesting it sort of, you know, on many different spectrums. You know, it can be very, very challenging, or, you know, and it can be very, very positive. And like Israel said, you don't know what's going to happen, but I think what we can be certain of is that there will be lots of things that are going to happen on every, you know, on that spectrum. You know, there's you know, so much, like Israel said, compassion and healing, so much wonder in all of this. I think it's one of the most beautiful conjunctions in our cosmos. But it's also has, you know, there's many, how this unfolds and plays out can be many different things. You know, Pisces rules everything from, you know, like you know, when people read astrological textbooks or cookbooks, whatever you call it, you know, it talks about, you know, Pisces being drugs and alcohol. Well, that's a very negative manifestation. It can also, you know, one could even say vaccinations are part of that, you know. And you know, it is a big pharma thing, really, a Jupiter, Neptune, and Pisces. But it's also finding, for example, other ways of healing. What we're going to come out of this is some really interesting stuff. And yes, the ocean is going to provide some really fascinating answers for us. So, you know, there's going to be cures in the ocean. And I don't know if anyone's watching the news, but I mean, we on this webinar we do every fortnight, where every time we're talking, there's like, you know, this week there's been a shark that was found on the beach, 400 years old, because it swims 250 meters under the surface. And then the Endeavour, I think it was the Endeavour boat that was found. And if you do the astrocartography for the Jupiter Neptune conjunction, it runs straight through the exact point of where they found it about 3 or 4 weeks ago. So there's all these ocean things coming up, which I'm so excited about. And on that, just one last thing, because I know you need to move
please.
on.
Both
but
of you.
the one thing, that the purifying aspect of this is, I think for me, what I hope to see, and what I've been bantering on about for years, is the purifying aspect of Jupiter, Neptune, and Pisces. A lot of the world dies of dehydration and doesn't get enough water. We have not been, we can do all these things, but we can't desalinate salt water. This is an opportunity, you know, and I know that there's companies that have invested billions on this, but this would be incredible for humanity, I think, if we were able to be able to desalinate water and where so people would have access to it. So that's my
Oh no, absolutely. Most of the world is right along the shores, you know, all the ports, you know, besides the rivers feeding into it. That's great. I often think of the solar energy, but between the two, water and air, the sun, it'd be brilliant.
Most definitely.
It's really true. You know, Pisces is the unknown. Neptune is the unknown. It's those, it's nature, the what we are unable to control. And so part of this is the imagination. That's what I'm thinking. And along with, because certainly we have always to remember, and I know just for audience sake in this, is that there's always there's shadow side. I mean, I often remember we couldn't see anything if we didn't have shadow, because yes, there's a color spectrum, but you have to have that shadow, you know, for depths. So, but imagination and that compassion, especially as we're leaving Pisces, it's like the tail of it is still with us to say, anchor in, we're going forward, we're going to use this. Because, okay, things about like movies, you know, movies, could be so instrumental as a,
well, when sorry, Israel, you go first. And
I was you're definitely going in the direction where I was going to touch on. I feel this Jupiter Neptune will definitely be able to be accessible via certain platforms, the arts, for example, music, film, photography, magic, spirituality. There's so many different platforms where this Jupiter Neptune can really open up. And you touched on a word there which really touches me, which is imagination. I believe it was Einstein who said something along the lines of imagination is the potential of something to come.
Imagination will get you everywhere.
Exactly. I mean, if we look at even some of the great things in our world today, whether it be technological, whether it be art, music, film, these things have come about because these people who have brought them about have been enabled to tap into or plug into a huge cosmic imagination and give it shape so it's beneficial for humanity. So I think this Jupiter Neptune conjunction will really flood the doors open, where it's a time where we can just plug in whichever way we can to the cosmos and really feed off this wonderful imagination, which will also open doors for healing, compassion. I believe even parts of the things that we're witnessing in Ukraine, for example, this is a perfect time to perhaps, be aware of and be compassionate for what people may be encountering and suffering, and hopefully this Jupiter Neptune can be and serve as a pointer, as a healing process for this catastrophe which we're seeing all over the world. So it is an amazing time.
Thank you. Yes, indeed. Wendy.
I'm a massive movie buff of complete, and I know Israel's chart, so he probably is too. So it's it's a fifth house thing, I think. But it's but I'm massive, and when Jupiter Neptune conjoined in the 1850s last time, there were so many developments in photography that when in the 1890s, when Neptune conjoined with Pluto, that is when the first film actually got off the ground. It's quite interesting because Neptune Pluto conjoined in Gemini, and the first movie I think was called The Kiss, and it wasn't a scorpionic kiss, it was a Gemini kiss. It was a
Yeah.
little sweet on the cheek, sort of, very
Yeah.
Gemini. It
Mm.
wasn't like anything passionate or anything, but it was interesting. And so, and then we, and so we saw the development of that, and again we're going to see it. I mean, I'm waiting for the hologram, but and when
Yes,
Neptune,
that's what I was thinking.
and when Neptune, well,
We'll
we've
be
got
here
it.
in person.
We do have it, but when Neptune went into Pisces, just over a decade ago, when Neptune went into Pisces, the whole world became a photographer. Everyone became a photographer. Everyone on their iPhones and Samsung Androids, the whole world was so we see these developments. But what I find also fascinating is I always do often webinars to pick who's going to win Oscar movies based on the astrology. And it's always fascinating. And of course, this year, Jupiter, Neptune conjunct in Pisces, you're always going to have the underdog, always the underdog
Yeah.
addressed, where people have to be aware and
That's true.
compassionate. And it was a low budget movie, Coda, and it was picked up, I think, by Apple TV. All very interesting how that played out. And it was, it's going to bring much more awareness of those marginalized in society and things like that. So this is what Jupiter Neptune does. This is what it brings out, the underdog. When Jupiter was conjoined with Neptune last time, it was in what was it in? I do have it. Yeah, it was
Oh,
in
here, I've got the chart.
yeah.
Nathan, can we have the chart? Thanks. Okay, let's see what we can see.
It
Here it
was
is. Oh, wrong one. Let's see.
the last one and
There it is.
no, the one 12 years ago when it was in Aquarius.
In Aquarius.
My
Okay,
apologies.
right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So
well,
what happened when it was in Aquarius is all the interesting here in Europe and the UK, there was Jupiter Neptune always highlights the underdog, but for this it was all the student protests. It was all the intellectual learning. It wasn't really a Sag thing. It was more of an Aquarius thing.
Yeah.
And so it was, and that we had riots here and protests on exact on that Jupiter Neptune conjunction in Aquarius. So here it's going to be different, of course. It's much more passive, but
and
sorry.
that was also, I think, the beginning of the square between Uranus and Pluto. At that time that went on for 3 years from
Yes.
You know what? In listening to both of you, I'm so glad that because anyway, I inspired it particularly about film last night because during World War II there were 5 American big time directors that slowly or however went into the war process in order to give information to people. So I watched that, but it made me realize Jupiter, of course, is language. And so here we have this language of, and we have Pisces that has emotion. I mean, it's a water sign, but it's also empathic. And so it's all that we're fielding together in a language and the spiritual, with empathy. I'm hoping really that there's going to be so many more movies that help people bridge this idea that we don't need to touch in order to experience. We can sense and get signs from other things.
And we've had to be since COVID, I get too. It's we've sort of been pushed into that with COVID, I think.
Yes, we absolutely have.
Most definitely. Yeah. And Jason Momoa, who he's a good friend of mine, and I've seen him quite often. At the end of last year, he just finished shooting a movie he called Aquaman, and he just finished the sequel. So that's
it's going to be huge.
Yeah, and that's going to be huge.
It's going to be huge.
Aquaman 2, and he's got his trident. So essentially, he's Neptune.
He's also Hawaiian as well, isn't he? He's Hawaiian.
Yes.
Well, that is incredible. I know sitting here, coming into Hawaii, you don't know what's up and what's down. One can imagine you're a pilot because everything is blue and white. the water's white and blue and the sky's white and blue. And I'm sitting there just immersed. It's just, I haven't been back in a while. Let's see what we can see before we have a few minutes before a little intermission break time. This is the chart that is happening. And for those podcast people, it is a United Time, Universal
Time. Yeah.
Yes, which is in Greenwich, and I was in Greenwich. Oh, that was a highlight of life, standing there. But at any rate, because it's most interesting that in this particular chart, Saturn, Venus, Saturn, and all the inner planets are having a heyday.
Yeah.
Saturn is intention to the nodes will be exact tomorrow on the 11th, whereas in the next day there'll be this exact Jupiter conjunction with Neptune in Pisces. But then Venus and Mars were conjunct twice, once in February and once in March, on the 6th of March. And that's unusual. It's not frequent that they conjunct every year. I mean, it can be every 2 years, but not twice.
And also with Pluto, which they hadn't done since 1997.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it was very interesting. Yeah. It's nice to have that Venus on the descendant, though, for this chart. It sort of really sort of builds up the arts, doesn't it? Literature, music.
Yes.
I mean, I'm waiting for this new genre that's going to come out of, all the cycles going on at the moment. But in the Jupiter Neptune, I mean, I think the arts are going to explode.
Yeah, it's a good point too, because Venus rules the North Node in Taurus, and Taurus is music also. Jazz musicians,
singing as well. Yeah.
So we're definitely going to see huge into in terms of music, film, spirituality, religion. We could hear of new revelations, maybe things being uncovered or discovered, or huge announcements, perhaps maybe from people, whether it be from the Pope or the head rabbi or head imam, of things being released or uncovered or realized or recognized in some way, which could also open up, because Neptune has that, the yearning to connect with something greater than ourselves. That's why Neptune is often associated with spirituality. It's God, essentially speaking.
It wants to unify with the source.
Exactly. Yes.
Yes, it does. Unity of brotherhood.
So Jupiter, Neptune, and with the Venus there, with the brotherly love. I think also as well. I mean, a few weeks ago, we all saw what happened at the Oscars, which is the one of the highest accolades you can get for movie, there's been this slap that Will Smith has gone on stage, and this has never been done before. People are still a little bit bewildered, and I think that's all a part of this Jupiter Neptune. What's going to happen now? Where is it going? What doors are going to open?
I had such compassion, and I know we don't have too long. I had such compassion for Will, and of course I had compassion for Rock. I mean, I was like, put both kids in the corner and let's get this worked out. But on the other hand, too, I suppose there's always the protagonist, right? I mean, every drama has some conflict, and so in a sense, Will has maybe because he's a very conscious person, but we're all human, and for him to take the time from, and you don't know how personal. I happen to have a family member who also has this hair condition, and I know how
Yeah.
traumatizing it can be. So it's hard to know. But then again, I was starting to think he could have done some slapstick, like, oh, like I'll do this to you, like something.
Yeah.
But he
Right,
wasn't in a sense of his funny bone was not active that night.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so now we're in this situation of compassion.
Yeah. Exactly.
And the whole 9 yards, like a melodrama. You are the villain. No, he's okay. All these factors.
Exactly. Yeah.
And of course, yeah. So it does bring it. And I suppose things need to come to a head. It's like all addictions, like if we have this addiction to violence, we've got to see it in front of us to go, I don't think so. In fact, that's why those filmmakers of World War II were so great, because they helped finally at the end show the atrocities of the Holocaust, so that there was no imagination. It was like, you got it.
You got it. This is it. Yeah.
Little reality. Well, I think we have a moment where we will break away, and I am so delighted to have Wendy Stacey and Israel Ajose of Britain, of the Mayo School of Astrology and the Astrological Lodge, the Astrological. Oh my goodness!
Astrological Lodge of London. Yeah, it's a tongue twister. It gets me too.
Well, we will be returning in just a moment to look at this next long cycle with Neptune. Thank you. While we take a break from this week's edition of Talk Cosmos, let's take a look at this cycle's archetype. We're currently in the period of Aries. By leaving a cycle based upon completion, the energy of Aries sparks initiation, creating action to separate into a new cycle of life. It's a fire sign, which means it will involve great emotion. And because separation may create resistance, it also takes great courage to break away to new ways of becoming.
Hi, it's Dr. Laura Tad, here to let you know I have an upcoming online course in personal mythology. In this course, you will explore the stories that you carry and how they impact your life. Some of these stories you have unconsciously inherited from your ancestors. Others are more culturally tied. As you unpack these stories, you will come to see which ones support you and your highest potential, and which ones you've outgrown and could use a rewrite. Class starts in April. Space is limited. For more information and to register, please go to my website, mythicsky.com. I hope to see you there.
Talk Cosmos brings you
Sarah Stromley at Brain Body Therapy, and you're listening to Talk Cosmos on Alternative Talk, 1150 AM, where we unveil astrology's ancient archetypes that continually build on the collective experience.
Alternative Talk, 1150 on AM, 98.9 HD3 on HD, 1150kknw.com on the web.
Turn, and I'm with Wendy Stacey and Israel Ajose. I think, Israel, you're still muted, but that's okay. So we're coming back, and let's look at those charts again. Let's see if I can pull them up. There we go. And I'm going to go on to the next one. This was the one in 1856. Six. Thank you. Yeah. And, there's a tri-wheel, but I pulled it up. Interestingly, Uranus is in Taurus for all three from 166 years ago. I found it so fascinating to realize that the camera, which changed all of artwork, because I know in the United States, most of the masters are of Europe. But here, because it happened to be the pioneering time of going across the United States, people had cameras. And so there's all these huge, great, large canvases of the parks and of the mountains and everything. And that's a lot of the glory of the artwork for the American artist. Being an artist, I like to check it out. But the camera was so instrumental. And Freud was also born in 1856, breaking the barriers of looking at our dreams and the unconsciousness, which we do. So, this is a tri-wheel. That's what I have. Okay. I don't know if we're ready for this. Well, we can. So here with the arrows, I've got the conjunctions, which are all in Pisces, of course, 18 degrees, 23 and 29. And so it could be, like many, it'll go back to beginning with Pisces again, because these are all Pisces conjunctions we're talking about. But Uranus and Taurus is interesting. And it goes backwards from 17 degrees, 13, 6 degrees each time. 9, whatever. It's interesting to see cycles go backwards. Of course, Uranus does rotate backwards. I don't know, but at any rate, I'm throwing out factors that may not have anything to do. But a couple of things that are interesting to look at, because we're in between these two cycles. One that we know something about, and one where we don't know, but 166 years is enough time to try to think about what the intention could be, besides on some other aspect of what these movies might be, and how to lead us with spirituality. And one idea, of course, there's the Uranus, but the other is that at that time, the transformational planet Pluto was in Taurus. Now that our thinking cap, Hermes, Mercury, is conjunct, and it's going to be square the Leo of manifestation again, of that humanity to actualize, to create, be co-creative. So it's taking the resources, one could say. At any rate, there's those ideas. And then the nodes go forwards. It starts in Aries, and it goes to Taurus, and then it goes to Gemini. It's sort of looking at cycles. It's like a gear shift in some ways.
Yeah, most certainly. I would like to know what as Wendy has quietly pointed out, like what with those years, with those 3 charts that you put up, to see how the world of photography, movies, media, although Hollywood may not have been established the way as we know it now. I mean, because it would still this Piscean or Neptune in Pisces, Neptune, Jupiter in Pisces, will still have a way of expressing itself within the time. So the first chart, because the first chart is that the 18?
Okay, yes, it is. And that would be right here. Is that the chart?
Yeah, that's this
My
one, right?
apologies.
1856.
I'm still learning this technique.
Yeah. So it would be a hugely interesting to see how the development of film, art, music, poetry, what was happening in the religious sectors also as well, because that can actually give us an indication of what we can on some level expect with this one. I think it's going to be, you can't pin it down. We're talking about Pisces here. We're talking about the 2 fish swimming in 2 different directions. It's a mutable sign, so it's not there to be pinned down.
True,
there is something fluid about it.
But I will throw out that it did fuel, from what I was reading, the industrial age on a new level, because it had, the steam engine had been back, I think, in 1700s. But this really fueled the next lease or league ahead.
Yeah.
And
I feel it would have stimulated a huge, because Jupiter Neptune in Pisces, there's going to be a huge again, through the vice of imagination, there's a huge dream, so to speak, the ideals of humanity, of wanting to move humanity forward in some kind of way, would have been huge, and was huge during those particular times. And like you said, that the birth of Freud and people like this, who really were the pioneers or advocates for looking at, well, humanity or aspects of humanity in a whole completely different way, in ways which we never imagined. So I feel was this also? Oh no, that would have been that would have been later. This is 1856. I'm trying to figure out when the birth of when was Hitler was later than this, right?
He
Oh,
was like
yes.
1880s. Well,
Yeah.
actually, he was born on the Neptune-Pluto conjunction. Yeah,
That's right.
Oh.
That was Neptune Pluto, but yes,
Mm.
that's correct. Yes.
Yeah.
And
But
wasn't
I
that
tell
in
you,
Gemini?
yes, it was.
I think
Yeah,
it's in
Yeah.
Gemini.
Yeah.
That was in
So
Gemini, so that was later.
and it was sort of. But I think it's interesting when Neptune in February, March 2020, Neptune was at 16 degrees of Pisces,
Right.
and when the Crimean War ended, that's
Yes.
the last time that Neptune was at 16 degrees of Pisces. And a couple of things happened from that with Florence Nightingale coming
Right.
out after that war and asking the entire world to wash their hands.
Oh,
Wow.
that reminds me of the
That's right.
Ukrainian, the ambassador here to Ukraine. Shortly after this war started, within the first week, she had an interview, and she asked, I thought, in a very eris, ERIS question to the world that said, isn't this, we must ask if nations haven't the birthright, I mean, I'm rephrasing this in my way, to have a calm life, and not just calm life, but a life of safety where you have a house, a home, just peace, without somebody coming in. And that really is the existential question, just like I think with that Crimea war back in at this year where the peace treaty occurred and the nations came in, it became evident that the small nation, the ethnic nations, had a right. There is this indelible Piscean right to just be one of one, of all.
It reminds me of my uncle used to write for Greenpeace, and I was about 8 years old, and he wrote a piece and he said the only way you'll get humans to hold hands and transcend beyond race and gender is, and religious differences, is if there was a threat of aliens. And there's something, and I remember it really stuck with me, and I thought he's right. I mean, there's so many, and that Jupiter, Neptune, and Pisces, I think, is a reminder that we are all human. And also that we live with other creatures on the planet. We're not the only living creatures. Yeah, and I think with Jupiter, Neptune, Jupiter always questions, it challenges, and I think it brings it's going to, I think this Jupiter, Neptune, and Pisces is going to increase a sort of decline in traditional religious doctrine and thought, because there's a seeking spiritual, and like you say, Israel, peace, isn't it? It's a peace. Sue, it's people want peace. And so therefore they look for something more universal and more accepting and more inclusive. And this is one of the other beautiful things that are going to come out. I mean, I'm so excited. I love this conjunction. It's
So we could be seeing a dissolving of one's belief system. The
righteousness.
Yes. I mean, things may be uncovered or discovered, or
and there's good
in a way that challenges our belief system. Like, whoa, because Neptune may be saying, well, what you believed in all along wasn't totally, apparent, or it wasn't
didn't
clear
have all the
because
information.
you didn't have all the information. Well, here's another piece to the puzzle. How about that? And to look at something from a perhaps different perspective.
Surprise.
Yeah.
Well, the other factor, because we'll move on to some other charts here, is Aries. Because we know that Jupiter in Pisces is a pretty quick transit, and I didn't check for this transit, but I imagine it is. And so therefore, in a sense, I really think it's enough to get us locked into this idea that this is a seed point, and meanwhile, we're going to go ahead and get action going so that we can have some and use that courage. And in this particular one, you were asking about the events, but we notice, of course, that the North Node is in Aries of leaving that partnership to have that becoming of identity, that newness, that courageousness. And going back here, this was one of the aspects that I noticed. Granted, it's with the last one, but Saturn next time conjuncts in Libra, which is really a great, I mean, the United States, that is one of our blessings. We have many things that are not, I think, but I mean, I'm not being negative. I'm just stating reality. Not everything is perfect, but we do have Saturn in Libra. So hopefully that's a good negotiation process, but it's conjunct that Mars, which is opposite at that time transiting Venus. It's going to be an energy. So what I'm getting at, okay, courageous. Next time, it's going to be Venus and Mars are going to, go ahead, Wendy.
What year is that? Sorry.
This is going to be 2018. Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know why my slide isn't quite, but it's 2000. No, it's 2188. And this will be just prior to the next conjunction at 29 degrees. Again, Venus and Mars are at 2 degrees. And the reason I brought that up is because, let's see. Okay, here it is.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
With this chart. And I know I added a lot. And here we are using it, but maybe we want to go back to this one, because
were you picking up the Mars in Libra? Was it to do with that?
Yeah, it is the Mars in Libra, and also the fact of here with this Mercury that we have right now. There's a simple Mercury, but it is at a seed point and ruled by Venus, which is here involved. Are we readjusting what was trying to get transformed last time with values and survival, and it happens to be the ruler Mercury of this. In other words, how can our thoughts work?
I mean, planetary cycles always tend to echo or bring along a theme of which they had previous. So every time Jupiter conjuncts Neptune in Pisces, I mean they will conjunct every 12 years when Jupiter goes through, but it's not going to be in Pisces, of course. But every time Jupiter conjuncts Neptune in Pisces, for example, it will bring on an echo and a theme of the previous one and the one before that. It's almost like there's always going to be some kind of continuation. And perhaps the Aries energy can be an Aries, being that it's the first zodiac sign, can be a place where something, gets planted or initiated in some way. Because I feel the Jupiter Neptune conjunction in Pisces can really dissolve and bring about perhaps maybe an ending and a breakdown certain barriers or certain structures and Aries. So when Jupiter does move into Aries, that can be the point where something new is initiated, where we can, start to initiate, something new. So, but the point I'm trying to make is that the Jupiter Neptune is always going to bring up something from the previous time that they were conjunct, and we're going to see that again. And like we've mentioned, the film, art, music, movies, the healing. I think the medical establishment, I think that's going to be very, very interesting, because that is all, pharmaceutical industry, the seas, the oceans, as Wendy's quite pointed out also as well, the marine biologists, and I think they're really going to, be
Discover
a whole new world is going to be discovered. We're perhaps maybe going to be seeing things about the sea that we've never encountered or never known, in our lifetime. So it's a great time to watch this space. But again, it's in Pisces. It can go in any direction. It can, it's very fluid. It's a mutable sign. There's no being able to pin this down as it's going to be this. It's going to be many different things. We're going to see it coming through many different avenues and paths, in our life.
Just thinking that another movie that's going to be released, I think, this year is A Little Mermaid is going to be released again.
Oh, wow.
So that is going to be interesting. But I was just looking at, because, Rudolf Steiner has a Mercury and Neptune conjunction. His Mercury is exactly on this conjunction, but his Mercury-Neptune is unaspected. So it's very maverick, and it's very much about what he does. And it's reminding me of this Pisces. Of course, the shadow is a Virgo as well. So this is, I think, a lot of it is to do with surrendering a very routine, like, which we're already seeing. We're already saying people don't go to work from 9 to 5 anymore. They're surrendering to this different way, and they're surrendering to almost some sort of faith, whether it's within themselves or something.
Yeah.
But when you think of Rudolf Steiner, with the Waldorf schools and the anthroposophical growing, and it's very ritualistic. It's sort of, that Virgo Pisces mix. But I think there's something about how people will actually want to live. Something a little bit more, and of course it's always in context of the other cycles going on, like the Saturn Pluto we had, and the Jupiter Saturn in 2020. So it's all in context of that. And I feel whenever I see Neptune, whenever I'm working with clients with Neptune transits, I always imagine the surrendering that has to surrender, rather than, we live in a world where we're asked to be action orientated, and we need, to have a path and a set this and a set that. I think this is about humanity falling down a rabbit hole and embracing it in a way. And saying,
I so appreciate, I fall back and I listen and I think, wow, because when I did, it reminds me that there were calendars. If you go back, which Solar Fire does, and we only have a couple of minutes, but I'm thinking about the timing. I was trying to figure out what could be the difference in timing. Well, it's not the fact that, like, for instance, they went from all kinds of calendars. That one of them was the Attic calendar, going from the ancient Greek to the Olympiad, and then of course there was that was in the year 766, and then in BC, and then 114 BC there was the pre-Julian Roman. I mean, it goes on, but our daily timing is amazing. Yeah.
And Pisces is not linear timing. I mean, my father is Polynesian. You're on a Polynesian island. I think Israel is in Africa. A lot of their cultures are not based on linear timing. So hopefully that will change.
And I love that.
Yeah, I love it too.
Yeah, like, let's have a window, I don't need to spotlight that moment.
Yeah.
The world doesn't operate.
It's a timeless moment.
Yes. Oh, bless
Beautiful.
you. Thank you, Israel. Thank you, Wendy. And here is everybody on this. It's just been I have thought, my goodness, what a big scoop of the universe we were able to dish out. And I loved it. So folks, thank you for being supportive and keeping your interest. I'm always interested. And Wendy Stacey does have her every Thursday night on mayoastrology.com. Check it out. And Israel always has his classes. So we will plow ahead and mellow with the raindrops in the rainbow. Thank you.
Thank you for joining
Thank
us
you.
on
Thank
Talk
you.
Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and her panel of guests connect soul growth patterns with the energetic cycles of astrology. Be sure to tune in next Sunday at 1 p.m. Pacific Time to continue your journey through the roots of the cosmic pathway.